Hello, everyone. I think we've got some people joining us now. We'll just wait 1 more minute just to give people a chance to hop on. Okay, just testing. Dale and Paul, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Fine.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And can you see me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, I think we might get started now. We've got a good quorum. So I'd like to firstly welcome everybody to the second in our series of PKF digital webinars. This is part of our digital engagement program where we're inviting PKF partners and client managers to learn more about the world of digital transformation and how it might impact your clients. Today, we will aim to provide you with some more knowledge, tools and ideas that might be helpful in generating conversations with clients about their business challenges, and how we might be able to overcome some of those challenges through the use of technology. Some of you may recall last seminar, we focused on wholesale distribution organisations. Today, we're going to turn our attention to a different organisation called not-for-profits. We hope that as a result of listening to this webinar and engaging with the collateral that we're going to send you after, that you're going to have a slightly wider context about this world of not-for-profits and be well equipped to start the conversation with these clients about their business challenges and take those first steps with your clients towards perhaps solving some of them through technology. As always, we welcome feedback and questions in the Q&A box. And as usual, we want to continue to improve the type and extent of info we're providing you and make it interesting and compelling. So we do want to know from you how you feel about these webinars, whether they're hitting the mark or how they can be improved. Presenting with me today, I've got Paul, our PKF Digital Business Development Manager, and I've got Dale, our NetSuite Channel Manager. So let's get started. So today's agenda. As mentioned, we're talking about not-for-profits. These are sometimes referred to variously as non-profits, NFPs, and sometimes social impact enterprises. They all mean the same thing. We'll define them, then provide some high-level insights about the trends that are impacting their world. We'll share a glimpse into how some of these not-for-profits are responding to these trends and how they're getting on with it. And we'll introduce some product information related to NetSuite, so you have a little bit more context and knowledge that you can fall back on if you're asked by your clients about how NetSuite can help with their challenges. And finally, some examples of where technology solutions have provided value to this industry sector. So if we now turn to what is a not-for-profit. The term not-for-profit interestingly describes the purpose of the business, not the legal form of the business. Ultimately, what defines one of these social impact enterprises as distinct from most other businesses is that instead of operating for the ultimate benefit of shareholders, instead, their reason for being is for a certain constituency or a cohort of people or some very specific cause. It could be those in a particular community, it could be a cohort of vulnerable people, or perhaps a group of people sharing a common plight or a common concern. And therein lies one of the interesting challenges of understanding and working with not-for-profit organisations as we go to the next slide. They are, by their nature, very targeted at specific needs. The challenge with this is that they represent a very diverse vertical, and that makes it hard to benchmark. It makes it hard to make broad generalisations about them in a business setting. They are ultimately there to make a difference to society rather than to make financial profit. And people who give funding and support to these organisations are not giving to the business. they give through the business to a cause that is meaningful, valuable, and impactful to them. This dynamic makes for some interesting insights, which Dale will now share with you to provide more context about this very interesting sector. Dale.
Thank you, Michael. The first insight that we're going to look at is the top 3 KPIs for NFPs. So as Michael mentioned, this sector is highly diverse, and while it can be difficult for NFPs to measure their own success, since its inception, NetSuite has been diligently working on KPIs that can be applied across the industry. Not only are they happy to share these KPIs, they also publish benchmarks against them based on the business maturity for that particular metric. So let's look at the top 3 KPIs for NFPs. The first one is administrative expense percentage. This is the percentage of costs incurred to run operations and management, including employee salaries, payroll, taxes, benefits, office rent, utilities, and office supplies. Businesses that are only just beginning to track this metric may see numbers as high as 22%. Over time, however, and with the better use of systems and data, they may be able to get this down to as low as 7%. Number 2, program expense percentage. Program expenses support the NFP's defined mission statement. For more established organizations, these expenses are typically the majority of their overall expenses, which is a good sign. Number 3, donor retention. Not all NFPs are funded by donors. Some receive grants from the government, for example. But for those NFPs that raise funds from donors, donor retention is critical. A high donor retention rate is a sign of loyal supporters who truly believe in their mission. Okay, let's move over to the top right-hand corner and talk about how storytelling has changed. NFPs have always done their best work raising money through storytelling. But 5 years ago, that was done predominantly through glossy brochures and annual reports sent to a select few. Today's digital tools are much more effective for advocating and supporting the mission and raising money. The 5 most popular tools that resource-constrained non-for-profits are using to accomplish their marketing and fundraising are an amplified web presence, powerful engaging videos, social media and listening tools, online fundraising tools, and email marketing. Now, out of all these tools, it should be noted that an excellent website really is the starting point for most NFPs. Once that's in place, they can look at some of the more sophisticated options available. Moving down to the bottom left-hand corner of the slide, the starvation cycle risk. Organizations that build robust infrastructure, which includes sturdy IT systems, financial systems, skills training, fundraising processes, and other essential overheads, are more likely to succeed than others. But NFPs don't spend enough on overheads. In a famous study conducted some time ago now, researchers uncovered a vicious cycle fueling persistent underfunding of overheads for NFPs. The cycle begins with funders' unrealistic expectations of how much it costs to run an NFP. At the second step, the NFP feels pressure to conform to the funder's unrealistic expectations. And the third step is for NFPs to respond to this pressure in 2 ways. 1, they spend too little on overhead. And 2, they underreport their expenditure in financial reports and fundraising materials. This underspending and underreporting perpetuates funders' unrealistic expectations, and over time, NFPs are expected to do more and more with less, a cycle which can starve the organization. And Paul will talk to this point in a bit more detail later on. Finally, in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide, we have the audit opportunity. Not all NFPs are required to submit financial reports that have been reviewed or audited, and the rules do vary depending on a number of factors. However, there are some common factors between the Australian Charities and Non-for-Profits Commission, ACNC, ASIC, and state and territory regulators. These are reduced reporting obligations if annual revenue is less than $250,000. If revenue is less than $1 million, a review of the financial statements may be undertaken instead of an audit. And for NFPs with annual revenue of $1 million or more, an audit is required. So while an audit for some of the smaller and medium-sized NFPs may not be required, audits can show that the organization is committed to financial transparency, something that helps board members, lenders, and donors sleep more soundly at night. Some foundations and donors require charitable NFPs seeking funds to submit an independent audit, and regulators and other ratings agencies may take it into consideration when making an assessment about the NFP. So audits are a great opportunity for NFPs to discuss their strategic plans and obtain practical tips from the audit firm for putting those recommendations into practice. I'll now hand over to Paul to discuss how the business drivers of NFPs are responding to these trends.
Thanks, Dale. So firstly, and I guess possibly most importantly, is the measuring impact. So how successful has the not-for-profit been, and is the money coming in going to good use? Ultimately, linking dollars received to outcomes achieved. There are three factors that dictate this measure, being how much has the program raised versus the cost to run it, what are the immediate results of the program, and what are the trend lines of this program over several years. By showing a direct link between donations, grants, and positive impact, non-profit leaders can make the case to stakeholders for continuing funding and the mission expansion. Measuring impact also comes back to individual contributors. A very clear example of this is when donors have a direct communication with who they are helping. Common in the 80s and 90s and still around today is sponsoring children or communities in Africa and having a direct relationship and communication with them. I'm sure we're all aware of the World Vision Sponsor a Child initiative that was and is a great success, largely because of the direct impact donors experience when helping these communities or these children. Research also shows that people are much more likely to contribute to charities when those people at the charities are volunteering and not on the payroll. Donated money that goes to paying wages pulls away from the cause. Secondly, is constituent relationship management, very, very similar to customer relationship management. The importance of linking a customer database to a financial system is of the highest importance in the not-for-profit sector. This is because how the investment comes in at the top of the funnel with donors, grants, and funding, and where it ends up at the bottom of the process, the beneficiaries, are the most critical aspects of a not-for-profit business. And from a systems perspective, this is all done in a CRM. There is a requirement to track individuals, organizations, households, relationships, and multiple revenue streams, while also managing all financial transactions associated with the cause. Also cutting across all the elements, and Dale mentioned this before, of a not-for-profit business is the requirement for auditing, which starts from the very first contact. Lastly, spend management. From the CEO to donors to the regulator, there is a heavy requirement around visibility and process when it comes to where, when, and what the not-for-profits spend money on. Not-for-profits need to be able to establish budget and spend controls to ensure compliance with policies, gain real-time visibility into the spending trends across the organisation, and effectively track and manage detailed costs associated with grants and funds. Spend management has a clear link back to my first point on measuring impact, and also my second point as the allocation of spend will need to be accurately costed to a record within the CRM and financial system. All three drivers have a strong dependency on one another. So the common challenges. The catch-22 of not-for-profits, which has been a bit of a theme what we've spoken about so far. So although the need for a not-for-profit is to grow is clear, so it helps more people, the path to effectively achieve that growth is less so and requires delicate balance. On the one hand, charities are praised for increasing program investments. On the other hand, they're scrutinised for raising overheads. It's a catch-22. Donors want to see not-for-profits grow without raising overheads, but a not-for-profit can't expand and add programs without adding additional staff and resources. In the business world, and not-for-profits are a business, the phrase "you need money to make money" rings true. Not-for-profits feel pressured to maintain low overheads and in turn to cut costs in areas like furniture, supplies, employee training, technology. The result is the starvation cycle, which Dale mentioned before, which can hold back the growth of not-for-profit. To combat this, not-for-profits need to be more transparent with funders and board members. There needs to be an understanding of the overheads required to accomplish growth or add a new program and report true overhead costs. With a more realistic understanding of costs required in accurate reporting and spend management, it should help to adjust expectations and let the not-for-profit business grow diligently. Secondly, strict compliance and reporting requirements. Most charities, not all, but most in Australia, regardless of size, are regulated under the ACNC. These charities have a reporting obligation whereby they need to produce what's called an annual information statement, which details operations and finances over a 12-month period. This requires a cross-section of what the not-for-profit does, including where the fund came from, who benefited, what number of programs and activities were carried out, and movements from previous years. This, as you can imagine, is an onerous task and would be much more so if information were kept in separate systems. Also, failure to report or incorrect reporting can jeopardize the continuation and tax-exempt nature of the for-profit business. Lastly, disparate systems. As I just mentioned, constituent relationship management financials are very counter-dependent on one another in the not-for-profit sector. Running these in separate systems, disparate systems, can cause no end of problem being time wasted from multiple data entry, no single source of customer information, no cross-information reporting from CRM to financials, and unnecessary cost of maintaining multiple systems. It cannot be overstated on the importance for a not-for-profit, the power of integrating accounting, fundraising, constituent relationship management, field and operations services, and in some cases, inventory management and e-commerce into one system. Thanks.
So thanks for that, Paul. So if we now start to turn on some points of reflection, we've learned that the industry is highly diversified, yet competing for finite support dollars. The industry is highly regulated around issues of transparency, and success is defined by measures of social impact. There's a really interesting tension here. The tension is that higher overhead means more scrutiny, but potentially more impact. And the secret for these participants to be able to manage the tension revolves around being able to link overhead to program outcome. So in other words, identifying overhead and being able to attach it to program costs, which then lead to program outcomes, which have a measurable social impact, puts them in a very good competitive position. And it justifies the costs of running that organization and allows for further growth. So now start to think about the clients you have and start to think about whether there are some clients perhaps that you may not have thought as being not-for-profit or social impact organisations who sort of behave in this way and maybe exhibit some of these characteristics. Maybe they've got a very strong mission and you can start to think about them in this paradigm. Start to think about how well you think they're able to measure and maximise their social impact metric. Do they even have one? Do they have a goal to expand their mission, or are they looking to find a new one? What do you know about their funding model and how is it working for them? As we transition to the next slide, we can start to think about how we might then explore some of these ideas with our clients. So we call these our conversation starters. So here are some ideas that might resonate with you about conversation starters with your clients. These are just some ideas. You'll see more of these when we send you the Ready Reckoner around not-for-profit, which will happen at the end of this seminar. But have a think about these ones and think about whether you like them or not. So you could ask the client things like, how well do you think you're able to match program costs, excuse me, with program impact? And would an improvement, excuse me, be meaningful for the organisation? How do you view and measure program impacts? And do you feel there are gaps in how it's measured, and would plugging those gaps potentially make a difference? Excuse me. Another one is, to what extent are you able to connect program recipient experiences with program donors to build a future pipeline? Because we know that connection is very important for these guys. Do you think your donors can see that connection and that nexus? And finally, how do you deal with the general perception that increasing overhead is an inefficient use of donor dollars? And if you could remove that perception, is that something that would further enable you to grow? So those are just an example of a couple of questions, and you can obviously take it any direction you like. But just moving on now to think about the solutions themselves. As we've committed to do, the idea of this webinar is also to share with you a little bit of product knowledge. It's not to try and create technologists out of this group. It's simply to give you a bit more context and a bit more understanding and tangibility about how NetSuite works. And in this particular example, how it can help a not-for-profit, provide them with the toolkit to overcome some of the things we talked about, like being able to better match program costs to outcomes, better connect funders to recipients, and so on. So I'm just going to hand over to Dale now to give you a little bit of a look under the hood. Dale.
Thanks, Mike. And some good points there. I'd also like to make the point that before we look at the solution, every NFP is different. And we use a very consultative approach, which means that we listen and ask questions to ensure we understand the business and its challenges before we present a solution. That said, NetSuite does have a social impact edition that includes many of the modules a typical NFP customer may require and benefit from. The beauty is that because the software is modular, your client can use only those modules that make sense for their business purpose. So at its core is the general ledger with segments and budgeting. The usual accounts receivable and accounts payable are included, as is procurement. But non-for-profits receive constituent relationship management instead of the usual CRM because their needs in this area are a little bit more complex. Revenue management can help NFPs recognize their revenue as their services are consumed, rather than when their funds are received. Multi-subsidiary, multi-currency, and multi-tax compliance means it can grow with the NFP as their mission expands, and the platform can be extended either via integration or with one of the many partner applications built on platform. One of the best differentiators for NetSuite is that it comes largely pre-configured, which means that clients enjoy the benefits of roles, KPIs, and dashboards out of the box. This results in reduced risk during the implementation phase and quicker time to value. I'll now hand over to Paul to talk about some of the excellent assets that we have available.
Thanks, Dale. So we have a wealth of assets that give great insight into how NetSuite supports the not-for-profit sector. They made a white papers, a whole lot of YouTube videos that are actually specific to a process within NetSuite, not just cartoons. It actually shows the system. Ebooks and other thought leadership, as well as case studies about customers that have beaten a path through the same forest before. NetSuite is by far the market leader in the not-for-profit sector. Can you just go to the next slide, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's by far lead. So on this slide, there's a lot of household names: Movember, Active Foundation, The Big Issue, and many more. These are all in Australia. Hundreds of not-for-profit organisations in Australia and around the world have moved from fragmented on-premise systems to NetSuite's integrated cloud ERP to reduce costs, improve operational efficiency, and free up resources that are better spent for fundraising, recruiting volunteers, and making a difference. Next slide, please. Thanks. Having a quick close look at some Australian examples, that these are all not-for-profits, but are all very different in how they help their communities. BirdLife, one of Australia's largest bird conservation organisations, which before having NetSuite used to manage program expenses in Excel. Transformation Aid does community development programs and has via NetSuite launched an e-commerce fundraising program. And Motivation Australia, who works with people with disabilities, it's been able to effectively track multiple programs that support less fortunate people in communities. Thanks.
Great, thanks for that, Paul. Now, the cost of entry for NetSuite may surprise you. So if any of the talking points that we covered today ring true, then please let us know. We have approval to offer an additional discount for PKF NFP clients who sign up before the end of the month. Provided there are fewer than 10 users, the annual cost will be around $15,000 with a once-off implementation cost of around $15,000 to $20,000. That's us for today. I'll now hand over to Mike to wrap us up.
Thanks very much, Dale. So on behalf of Dale, Paul and myself, we hope that you've been able to take a few ideas away from today's session. Next session, we've had a few requests from people to try and get a little bit more hands-on understanding of how the product works. So we're going to, for the third seminar, provide you with a very short demo of how NetSuite works. So hopefully for some of you, that'll take you a little bit further on the journey in terms of how being able to visualize how NetSuite works and how it might help clients. But again, we are looking for feedback. So whether it's about the content, about where we're aiming and targeting the content, or whether it's just some useful topics that you'd like us to cover, please let us know. Don't be shy about providing us with ideas about how we can make the sessions even more impactful. We will come back to everyone with responses to any questions that were left in the chat, and we will provide you all with a follow-up email to give you a few some artifacts, some material that might come in handy if you want to read it in one of your more quiet moments. Please bear in mind also that if you have any questions from today, you're most welcome to drop yourself, Dale or Paul a note, and we'll certainly come back to you quickly. So have a great day, everyone, and thanks for taking the time out to join us today. Thank you.
Thank you.